Live from the palatial studios at Emerson College in beautiful downtown Boston, this is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America, together, investing, activism, and supporting the middle class. Now, here's Jeff.
Thank you, Shane, and good afternoon, Americans, and welcome to the Jeff Santos Show. We are live in Studio A. It is great to be with you today on this 26th of April, 2016. We got ourselves a great show today. Started off with Mark Taylor-Canfield. We'll talk to our really good friends at Badass Teachers. Miss Jones will join us. We'll talk about the Detroit situation. Just awful, just completely awful. The conditions that people have to work in and go to school and start to learn in. We'll get that perspective from our friends at Badass Teachers. At 4:30, Wendell Potter will stop by. Of course, the whistleblower from Aetna Insurance, well known. It was all over MSNBC and other networks talking about what insurance companies are up to back then, before the Affordable Care Act, and now. We'll talk with him about single payer throughout the world. A lot of people don't understand the difference between what Canada does, what Europe does, but the basis of it is the same. It's to give universal health care to the citizens of that particular country, which we need here desperately. It's pretty simple. Now, of course, today is primary day in 5 states, Rhode Island and Connecticut here in New England. And in the mid-Atlantic, you have Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. These are states which should be competitive on the Democratic side, maybe with the exception of Maryland, where Secretary Clinton is heavily favored. But all the others should be relatively close. In my opinion, what Senator Sanders has to do is to keep it close. We'll talk with a reporter from Pennsylvania, our great friend, you know her on Thursday, Sarah Jones of Politicus USA, which is based in the Burgh, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, actually. And we'll talk with Sarah about that. And we'll get a perspective from those who are part of the Sanders campaign surrogate team, our good friend Neil Soroka, of course, Democracy for America, which has endorsed Senator Sanders, will join us at 5:30. Phone number 772-925-8206. You can email me, Jeff at revolutionboston.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter. And we'll let you know more about changes within the Jeff Santos Show, and where we can be heard and so forth over the next couple of days. So, for those listening on AM 980 or any of the other audio places, tune in, iTunes, etc., you can continue to start listen live from 3 to 6. Continue to listen live until June 1st. Of course, you can always listen via Twitter at Jeff Santos Show. A couple of our folks do that way. So you go to Twitter at Jeff Santos Show, goes right to the website. And we're trying to pull that together also for Facebook, too, if you want to go there. And, of course, you can email me, Jeff at revolutionboston.com. "34 minutes past the hour." We love playing music from the likes of Pearl Jam and the likes of the Foo Fighters and the Rolling Stones. But we love playing a little music from our contributors. That is Mark Taylor-Canfield on the guitar. And maybe him on the vocals, too. But let's find out. Mark Taylor-Canfield, great independent journalist from the great Pacific Northwest, joins us as he regularly does on Tuesday. Is that you singing, too, my man?
Oh, yeah. I did play one guitar. I played the noisy guitar. I just told them I'm going to plug in the guitar and make a bunch of noise because I want this to sound more punk-like. The rest of the really good guitar work is actually by some great studio musicians. But I also wrote the words and sing the song as well. So my main gig is as a vocalist, Jeff. That's what I like to do most. Although I can play keys and guitar and other instruments, I like to be the front man. It's more fun, you know.
You got to be front and center, my man. I know that. Only kidding. You're a great team player, and you do a great work both behind the mic and out there with your notepad and computer, too. Got lots to talk about, my friend, but I wanted to get to this point here where, you talk to a lot of the millennials, and we both, and I thank you for helping set up the interview we did the other day with the woman who was protesting outside of Mr. McDermott's office. And but what I am sensing here from the Clinton campaign, and this to me is the aggravating part as a progressive, as a longtime Democrat who has basically done a lot for this party, and I kind of think in a lot of ways they kind of given me the middle finger as we approach another election cycle. But what I'm saying is that this idea that he has to go to his supporters, like they're going to obviously, go in lockstep and say, we got to vote for Hillary Clinton if she's the nominee of the party. Doesn't work that way. With insurgent candidates, they have new voters, independent voters, as our friend Senator Sanders does. And you don't have that same situation with Barack Obama, who was semi-establishment, had the likes of Durbin and Daschle, but mainly was the outsider that year, and Secretary Clinton, who was once again the insider. Again, former First Lady, former Senator, long-term from New York, serving Wall Street, etc. Okay? And today, we still get this idea that Senator Sanders has to, go on the rivers like Moses did and say, okay, everyone come with me and go to Hillary Clinton. Please. This is crazy stuff. Your thoughts on this from the West Coast, my friend?
Well, we have been covering the nomination process for the Republicans and the Democrats at Democracy Watch News, so you can follow that coverage at Facebook and Twitter. And I am seeing a very strange phenomenon right now, which doesn't normally happen, and it wouldn't happen with an incumbent, which is that the presidential candidate of another party just stepped up the other day. Her name is Jill Stein, and she's the Green Party's presidential candidate. And she said that she wants to collaborate with Bernie on this political revolution. At the same time, you've got Charles Koch saying that he could support Hillary Clinton. And there's a news story outlining how the Citizens United decision has actually helped the Hillary Clinton campaign raise money from these PACs. So in the midst of all this news and other stories like a protest coming up against Patty Murray on May 20th here in Seattle because of her endorsement of Hillary Clinton, and then a major Bernie Sanders march has already been planned for Philadelphia at the National Convention. So things are not lining up the way that CNN and other major news agencies would like it to where Hillary Clinton is going to be the clear winner. This is a major, major challenge. And the millennials that I'm talking to, Jeff, for the most part, tell me, and believe me, there have been long conversations about this, myself having long phone calls with good friends, just trying to analyze this situation. And the majority of people in Seattle that I talk to, especially the millennials, say that they cannot at this point vote for Hillary Clinton. So that's the feedback that I'm getting. And meanwhile, he is saying that it's not up to him to tell his delegates who to vote for, that it's up to Hillary Clinton to convince his delegates that they should vote for him. So that's opening the door for not only a wide open convention, but it does kind of reaffirm what you just said. Like I was describing, the superdelegates as these superheroes who fly through the sky and have superpowers and lightning bolts coming from their rings, and that they're supposedly under the 10th commandment or 11th commandment, that came down from the mountain on stone tablets saying that they have to support Hillary Clinton. And the sands are shifting a lot more than the media wants people to know. This is a very historic moment. And I don't think you can predict anything at this point, Jeff. I really don't. I think the The political pundits and the consultants and all these people in the major networks are full of BS. They have no idea what they're talking about.
I couldn't agree with you more. I just want to give you another one here. I just come across on the monitor here in front of me on NBC at the New York Times. All the news is fit to print until we lie about the Iraq War to the American people. Look, great newspaper, but they're not perfect. They're saying now, and they probably got a leak from the Clinton campaign to go ahead and try to discourage the vote today. This is how Clinton operates. They get Bill Clinton to walk around in the votes in New Bedford and Chicago and every other place that he goes if the races are close somewhere. This is the game they play. So the game today is saying that, they're going to reassess after today's vote is the Sanders campaign. Jane Sanders, just on, of course, the wife of Bernie Sanders, just on saying absolutely, completely false. But this is sort of the rumors that are now going. Mainstream media, New York Times, you can't get more mainstream than that. That's the game that they're playing. And, it is no doubt that between the major networks and the Times and the Post and everyone else do not want to see a President Sanders. And, whether it's the idea of a unifying corporate candidate like Hillary Clinton, who a lot of folks, and apparently including the Koch brothers, because of her taking of Wall Street dollars, or whoever the Republicans nominate, whatever the three stooges, I guess, that are still left. But the fact is that this to me is outrageous, but this is what we're getting if you only get your news through major networks or major newspapers. Your thoughts as a journalist, my friend?
There's this new phenomenon, too, which has been covered in a couple places. I know Lee Camp was talking about this and kind of making fun of it, that there's also the social networking platforms and giants like Google. There's a lot of instances of this, people call the data canyon, where you're stuck getting regurgitated news stories from things that you've already read about. So once people start following Donald Trump, then if you follow their news feeds, man, it looks like everybody supports him, because that's the only information they're getting. Not only that, but it's also very ironic that the candidate that nobody, at least the majority of people, do not want to become president, gets about 23 times more media coverage than the person who would make the best president of the United States. So that's highly ironic. And then a couple more things. Time Warner is one of Hillary Clinton's top contributors throughout her career. So guess who the parent company of CNN is? So folks who were wondering, well, why is Bernie Sanders not getting much coverage on CNN? Why are there protests outside of CNN headquarters? Well, look at who owns them, and look at who's giving the money. It's back to the old Watergate thing, and I think especially with the Panama Papers, this has been proven to be true. It's Woodward and Bernstein again. It's follow the money. If you follow the money, a lot of what's happening in the news media and a lot of what's happening in the Democratic and Republican Party is about the money trail. And then one more thing, just to top it off, Jeff. Reporters Without Borders, which is an international advocacy group for journalists, came out with their annual 2016 report. The United States is ranked 41st in the world in terms of press freedom, behind Slovakia, by the way. So maybe journalists in the United States should start questioning whether they're working for the right people. And that's why independent programs like yours are so important right now, because there is a lot of political propaganda being fostered on people everywhere. It's almost impossible to avoid. So people are getting disgusted with the corporate media, and they're looking for alternatives. So thank God you're doing
well, we got one
here.
Well, thank you for you, too. Without your hard work out there, we wouldn't have found out a lot about this stuff. It's a Jeff Santos Show, back with Mark Taylor-Canfield after this timeout. Talking to our good friend, Mr. Mark Taylor-Canfield. Mark, one of the things that is going on, and I find that this is to me a big debate, is that people need to realize that when it comes to getting young people to vote, it's not an easy thing. It did happen in 2008. It almost happened in 2004 with Howard Dean. But it's very hard to keep them interested. And I think that the Democratic Party, as opposed to demanding certain things, should have their hands out, should have their surrogates and political leaders working to try to get people inside. Not like what they were doing at Jim McDermott's office. You know, this is the problem, even with good progressive candidates like Mr. McDermott. The fact is this. You have to be able to talk to your constituents, as was the woman we had on the other day. And they don't want to do it. So that is unfortunately where we are today. And I guess you see it quite a bit in the Seattle metropolitan area. Not a lot of people from Patty Murray to Miss Cantwell to the governor and others are reaching out to those young protesters. That's the sad part about it, because
they are not reaching out to 73% of the delegates. They're not reaching out to their own party. And as far as the arrest of Danae Evans went, I'm so glad you got a chance to get her on the air and let her speak her piece. But that my article for that at Daily Kos at my blog has gone crazy viral, and it's really stirred up a lot of things at Daily Kos. Not that things weren't already stirred up at Daily Kos with the Hillary and the Sanders camp going at each other, and actually, a lot of very insulting and arrogant, rude comments from the Hillary supporters on that article. But we won't go there right now. I do have a couple comments, though. I was concerned about a couple things during that incident, and I was the only reporter there, so I scooped everybody. I scooped the Seattle Times, and, local news stations were using my Twitter feed in their news reports because nobody else was there. But what happened is Danae Evans was arrested, and my impression of that is that it never should have had to escalate to an arrest. In fact, nobody went there, to protest and be arrested. They were trying to get information. Also, I should say this, that the McDermott staff did meet with this group earlier. Not that day, but they had a meeting with them before. Now, according to Wes Irwin, who's running for the state legislature, by the way, but who's been one of the groups behind, or one of the people behind this, the Impossible is Possible movement group, he told me that they had a meeting that day at 2:30, which had been canceled by McDermott's staff. And so when they arrived to ask, if they could speak to staff, they were told no, there would be no meeting. So they decided to show up anyway, basically. And then they were told, no, there will be no meeting. There will be no future scheduled meetings. And then any question that they had was basically no commented by the receptionist. And she was saying it's because there are congressional guidelines and ethics guidelines which say you can't talk about campaigning at your, your government office. I wondered why some of the staff, somebody from the McDermott staff, didn't step up to try to mediate, to try to explain what was going on, to accept their statement or their letter or whatever they had to give, and try to, ameliorate the situation. But instead, they seemed to be hiding somewhere in the back office and refused to come out, and left this poor receptionist to deal with a group of frustrated Bernie Sanders supporters who feel like Jim McDermott's superdelegate endorsement of Hillary Clinton does not represent what's happening in Washington State in terms of the Democratic Party. To admit that they're correct, it does not represent what's happening in Washington State, where all of these candidates are going to be primaried now. And there's already been a rally in Olympia at the state capitol with candidates who are challenging Cantwell and Murray. And also, the other issue I had with it was that I was threatened with arrest. And the last time I was arrested while covering a news story at the state capitol, I ended up winning a major federal civil rights lawsuit. It is a violation of freedom of the press to arrest reporters who were just trying to do their job. And I made it very clear that I was there as a journalist trying to document what was happening, but I was still told, that if I came within, probably 30 seconds of being arrested, because we were all told we had to leave the office and presumably the building. And then Danae kept asking questions and delayed she didn't say, okay, I want to get arrested or whatever. She just kept asking questions, and the rest of the people were still in the room as well. But she was the only person who was arrested. Everyone else left. I didn't want to get arrested because I needed to file this news story, and I'm glad that I did. Otherwise, it would have been hours before it got out, but before I could actually report on what happened there. But there were several things that really didn't make sense to me, and the fact that the staff has been willing to meet with them before and hear their complaints and also their lobbying efforts, to get McDermott to support Bernie Sanders, it confuses me why all of a sudden now, I don't know why they didn't at least have somebody there besides the receptionist to deal with a delegation of people who had already met with their staff, previously. So, and the bottom line, Jeff, is that, although McDermott has been very popular around here, if he's not careful, he's going to end up retiring as representing the old guard. And there's already been complaints about his position on some of the trade agreements, even though he's very progressive on social issues. So this news media coverage, including my own reporting, is probably not going to help that reputation in terms of being the ideal progressive leader in the Northwest. And, that's just an outcome of natural political, the machinations that are going on within the Democratic Party, and that, I end up having to report on. I have not been that critical of Jim McDermott on most of the issues. I've, met him personally, and he seems like a nice guy. I just wonder why they're dropping the ball at this point. It's confusing.
I don't know. I don't know if they've been told by the DNC, and there's obviously, a lot there. The fact is that he's been there for, over 25 years. And I just feel that, he doesn't want, I guess, to go out, fighting the establishment, which he has done. I mean, this guy was one of the original single-payer advocates in the early 1990s, to the left of Clinton when she and her husband were trying to do a health care reform back in the early 1990s. And he's been against the war in Iraq, too. But I think that these guys, again, have been there, much too long, and I'm actually glad that he is stepping down, because you need new blood, and you need, this doesn't about age, but it's just about the time spent in Washington D.C., and that to me is problematic. When all these folks spend this much time there, I think it's really time to go. And I'm hoping that the new person. Go ahead.
Well, it should be mentioned too that I don't know whether you tried, but I definitely tried to contact. I called the communications director for the McDermott office in Washington D.C. to try to get a comment about his reaction to Hillary Clinton bashing single-payer healthcare, which has been, and you brought that up with me, which is one of the reasons why I called them. No response.
Yeah, no,
absolutely
no
not.
Response.
So what?
Pretty sad, Mark.
Draw one conclusion from that: he does not want to criticize Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, that's the facts.
That's the only
Mark Taylor-Canfield, we'll talk to you next Tuesday, my friend. All the best.
I'm just surprised that they didn't respond at all.
Yeah, I am too. All the best, Mark. Gonna run. We'll be right back. Let me just start here with the news of the day politically. And, one of the things that really aggravates me as a progressive, as a person that does remember 2008, is all this malarkey from the Clinton campaign. I guess last night I didn't get to watch the Clinton side. I did get to watch a little bit of Bernie. I was watching baseball and hockey. Congratulations to the St. Louis Blues, by the way. They finally nixed the Hawks. Fantastic game last night, in which a former Hawk, Troy Brouwer, who was part of that 2010 team, was the game-winning, had the game-winning goal against his former team. And now the Blues advanced to play the Stars, in case any of you hockey fans care. But here's the problem with Clinton and her campaign. She was on last night with Rachel Maddow, and she's saying there's absolutely no preconditions. I basically told all my supporters, and only about 40% of them wanted to vote for Obama, and I told them to go vote for Obama. I had no preconditions. Okay. Let's review the record. The record was, in late 2008, Secretary Clinton, on May 31st, we looked this up as I was watching the news clips this morning. May 31st, she was making a comparison to staying in the race, comparing her husband's 92 victory, didn't clinch until California, May 31st, the June primary in California at that time. Actually, it wasn't even, come to think of it, this is another reason why it's such a bunch of malarkey. California was in March. She ended up in Puerto Rico, and she was still out there. She made the comparison, and a lot of people took it not in a nice way. In fact, the Huffington Post said one of her worst days in the 2008 campaign. She was comparing the fact that Bobby Kennedy was killed in the California primary in June 5th or 6th, whatever it was. Might have even been June 7th of that California primary in 1968, in which he was assassinated in the Roosevelt Hotel in Los Angeles. She brought that up as a reason for staying in the race. This is kind of crazy stuff at the time, and she was hit hard by the media, deservedly so. Bringing that up, considering all the turmoil of 1968. So this is a campaign, the Clinton campaign, which has played dirty in the past. Ed Rendell made a lot of overtures in February after the famous Obama comment of those who cling to their guns and God. Is talking about, whether African Americans can be elected in Pennsylvania, making the comparison to former Steeler Lynn Swann. There's a lot of stuff here, folks. And if people want to look at Bernie Sanders as just another candidate, then they have another thing coming. He is not. He is an insurgent candidate. Insurgent candidates do not control their supporters. It's a much different scenario when you have a former president's wife who's running, a former senator from New York, representing Wall Street, as she has said time and time again. And they end up with machine-type Democrats, which you can move forward. Some of the machine Democrats are good. Some of them are part of labor unions and so forth. But it's not new voters, independent voters, and college students. These are different folks. Hillary Clinton didn't have young voters in 2008. That was Barack Obama. So it's a whole different story. It is really apples and oranges when you are comparing Obama and Clinton to Sanders and Clinton. First of all, the race is still not over, and you have the big kahuna where you didn't have it in 2008. 475 delegates in California. Now, I'm aware of the math. Everybody wants to talk about math. Math and maps. Must be a whole M thing with the networks, I guess. But as we obviously know that all these states are nearby, we have the maps. Everybody's knowing where the geography is. Better than when we invaded Iraq, because nobody knew where that was. But anyways, here's the point. Secretary Clinton is frustrated because she was the heavy favorite, and she thought she would put Bernie away, months ago. It has not happened. In fact, up until New York, he had won 8 of the last 9. And we know that even though there were a lot of shenanigans, Hillary Clinton won the race fair and square in New York. And she'll do well tonight. But it's still not over yet. It's maybe the narrowest of narrow paths. And it may be that both end up short of the number, which I think is 2387 or something like that. But the fact is that you have to continue the process, or as our friends in Canada would say, the process. And therefore, if you continue the process, I watch a lot of hockey, then we'll see what happens. And at that point, we'll see if Secretary Clinton holds on to her lead in the superdelegates, which are up for grabs and should not have been bandied about. That's part of the whole thing of superdelegates. Nobody should know that you have them, because it's obviously going into a state that you are a superdelegate and you hold it over the competitor's head. It's not a fair fight. It's bad enough you have these Saturday night special debates that nobody's watching, Lawrence Welk Invitational. So what we have here, folks, is a favorite daughter if you might, as opposed to favorite son. And Hillary Clinton gets all the advantages and is still fighting today to win the nomination. She doesn't have the pledged delegates to win the fight. She has to get enough pledged delegates combined with the superdelegates, which are still up for grabs, which still not really come into play until the convention to do it. She's obviously in a much better position than Senator Sanders is. There's no doubt about that. But let's be real, folks. In the Clinton campaign, let's be real. You know, let's not do the typical Republican game where you basically play a shell game. Oh no, he said this, but I didn't say that. No, I'm perfect, and you're the one that's a bad person. And that's what we're seeing. Bernie Sanders, as I said, needs to do fairly well tonight. If he can win a couple of states and come close in Pennsylvania, which is the biggest of the five, I think that would be considered a successful evening for the senator. He's going to lose Maryland, probably by double digits. But the fact is that if he remains close, May and June look very good for Senator Sanders. And again, California, 475 delegates, the biggest state in the country, the most delegates. He needs to win big, but he has the possibility. We'll talk more about this. It's the Jeff Santos Show. Back in a flash. Lots going on.